So once again, welcome everyone to the CSE Development in Action webinar as part of the 2024 webinar series. Today's webinar, as you can see on the slide, is on corporate sustainability and organizational approach to build a sustainable world. And this webinar topic will address the CSE theme of promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. Presenting this topic today, we have with us Souvik Ghosh. Souvik is a Commonwealth scholar from India. He completed his MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development from the University of Cambridge. By profession, Souvik is a mechanical engineer with specialization in engineering for sustainable development. He's currently the director of sustainability solutions at a leading technologies consulting company. Souvik has worked with leading corporate organizations globally for over 17 years, and his expertise spans as a sustainability advisor, assurance, strategy, supply chain, finance, and leadership responsibility. And in this webinar today, he will speak more about his work within corporate sustainability and discuss his work around the topic. The format for today's webinar will include a presentation by Souvik, followed by a quick Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please do send in your questions via the chat box. Thank you also to everyone who have sent in your questions via the registration form. We will try our best to raise some of those questions. Please do send in your questions via the chat box. After the webinar, we will also have a 30 minutes post networking session for attendees. So please do stay online if you can to get a chance to network with your fellow attendees, discuss your work or your research area around this webinar topic around corporate sustainability, or ask any questions you may have with fellow attendees. So please do take this opportunity to network post-webinar after the Q&A session. So with this, Souvik, I would now like to hand over the floor to you to begin with your presentation.
Thank you, Eva. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice opportunity to talk to all of you. So as Eva rightly mentioned, today's topic, corporate sustainability and organizational approach to build a sustainable world. So I think it's all clear, right? Everyone can share my screen. Sometimes the buttons in my keyboard are not working. I'm not sure why, but I will make sure everything goes well.
It's all good, Souvik. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So today's session, primarily I have divided into 5 subsections, which you could see over here. So I understand, and as I have been briefed by Eva, that that the audience has a mixed background. So before I get into the actual topic of discussion, I have kept an introductory section as what is sustainable development, though I assume everyone of us, in our lives by now has heard this term. So what is or what was corporate sustainability, beginning of 2000, and how I have seen it. So I will bring in my personal experience or angle to this discussion, and of course then get into the different topics of supply chain, climate change, reporting, and stakeholder engagements. So with that, I move on to the next slide. Yeah. So what is sustainable development? So obviously, I'm not going through the description of the definition of it. It's visible in the screen. I just would like to highlight that sustainable development, this concept, didn't start in last 5 or 10 years. If we go on further research on it, and if you are interested, you would see it started way back in the 1980s. Okay. So it was a term which was first coined by the Norwegian Prime Minister. And, of course, in UN sessions, and there were a lot of meetings and reports published. And it is an initiative which has been, practiced by organizations who are leaders in their own domain or who are practices sustainable, offerings. They have done it for a long time. It's not only in India, it's worldwide. We could see that. So, in sustainable development or in our daily life, we hear that, okay, environment, social governance, these are the pillars, or some says, 3P, which is planet, profit, people, more or less they imply the same thing. Of course, as you could see, nowadays we talk a lot about sustainable development goals, okay? So as how we can take this world and of course make it better for the next generation in different fields of like eliminating poverty or gender equality and all that. So that is the background of sustainable development. So what is corporate sustainability? Of course, as you could make out from the term, corporate sustainability is pretty much linked to the sustainability practices an organization does. And, of course, in the domain of environmental practices of waste management or, reducing emissions or water management, etc., social initiatives. When I say social, it's not only limited to labor practices or, just doing welfare of employees, but beyond the boundary of the organizations. And of course, the economic pillar is, an important one as well. So before I get on to the next thing, the important bit is who are an organization stakeholders? Because initially, organizations used to think a lot about its shareholders. Okay, the approach has changed, and of course, we will look into that in the subsequent sections. But who are an organization stakeholders? If that's the question that's coming in our mind, then organization stakeholders are not only the employees. The organization stakeholders are not only the shareholders. They can be the community members in where that organization is functioning. They can be the supply chain partners, the vendors, and everyone. Okay, and they play a very critical role. So in one of the subsequent sections, we'll see how a critical role these stakeholders play. So before we get into like how corporate sustainability is contributing these days, or what are the changes, I'm not aware of the audience profile, but of course, having working in this domain for nearly almost 17, 18 years now, I have been lucky enough to see the change, how companies view or approach sustainability and how they integrate it nowadays to take it forward. I've seen that change. But how was it actually? When I had started career, how was it? So it used to be, sustainability was pretty much synonymous with corporate social responsibility, or even it used to be lying in the periphery of an organizational, uh, initiative. Okay, it's one of those things which an organization has to do. But gradually, this thing has moved from that periphery of an organizational focus to business and operational or corporate needs. Because companies have started to understand the value of it, the impact of it. So sustainability with a purpose, sustainability with because it creates an impact. Okay, so it's a focus area now. And of course, in today's world, lot of tangible benefits are there, and companies who have been practicing sustainability, if we follow their sustainability reports, they have been highlighting those. And there are regulations all across the world coming up a lot nowadays, so which also kind of factor for these organizations to move into. practicing or integrating sustainability practices and report. So how has been sustainability now these days? So what are the key trends? So as I was telling that, nowadays organizations are integrating sustainability practices, because one thing is, of course, branding. Nowadays, the consumers are conscious. For example, if we are going to buy a drink, we always keep an eye on the nutritious value of that. Okay. Or if I take a different sector, okay, suppose a retail company, a global retail company, for example, which supply chain in different parts of the world, will not be happy to see its name in the news because of some forced labor issues in some countries in the world where its supply chain goes. Maybe whatever tiers of that supply chain is, right? So organizations have got more alert, they have more focus on every aspect of it. So integrating sustainability, and companies are now going ahead and reporting. So one is, there is reporting regulations. That's true. There is regulations, or there is a factor where companies are encouraged to, report on and get it verified by independent third party. But of course, companies are also seeing the value of it. And of course, next is the climate change, the buzzword nowadays, right? Emissions, climate change, net zero, decarb, and all that. So companies are also getting into it because, if I take the example of India, so India has committed to net zero by 2070, if I'm not wrong, right? So if you are operating in India, you have to actually take on those goals. So those policies or those vision mission goal which are being announced also cascades down to different sectors and industries, and you have to start developing or integrating sustainability practices so that you also align yourself. Just as an example. The next thing is the sustainable supply chain. I gave a hint on that. We have a section on it, so we'll get into much detail of it. And as I was mentioning, the shift from a shareholder approach to a stakeholder approach. Okay. So it's not only the shareholders who demand, of course, they are a critical stakeholder, but it's also important to take on the views of your vendors, of your supply chain partners, or even the community members where it is operating. Okay. Otherwise, there can be, strikes, protests, which may not be good for the organization's branding or for the operations, or, for, the company's image as well. The shift from the linear to the circular economy model. So initially we used to, throw things away. Now, of course, that behavior is encouraged by organizations. They are doing it themselves, but also within the consumer. A good example is like IKEA, where they are encouraging organizations and encouraging consumers to give it back the used stuff, so that they have a discount. They have some different models where they are encouraging, okay, reuse it. So they are putting it back to the loop again. So again, a big focus on circular model. Strengthening social sustainability pillar. As I was mentioning, a lot of focus on the community engagements. People are seeing the benefit out of it. Again, going back to the example of India, we have the section 135, if I'm not wrong, which focus on the CSR initiatives. Of course, 135 of the Companies Act 2013. There are a lot of regulatory focus. If I come to this part of the world, we have the CSRD, which will be overall impacting 50,000 companies, which will be impacted to report. There are regulations coming up in Australia. I was talking to one of my colleagues. They have their regulations coming up. If I'm not wrong, again, that will be effective from next year. If we are seeing US, if we are seeing Europe, we are seeing India, we are seeing Australia, and more or less that covers the entire globe, right? So there is Regulations because people are understanding the value of it, the purpose of it, and everyone wants to take the good part out of it. Of course, sustainable financing, lot of, it's a big domain, where sustainable investments are encouraged. We have the green bonds, the loans, and all that principles, and the role of technology. Okay, it is now taking sustainability to a new role where intervention of digital component, as famously or popularly told as digital sustainability, is helping companies to integrate and take forward sustainability to the next level. With that, I will quickly. Sorry, I'm facing some issues. Yeah. So, what are the focus area for today's session? So, the initial last 10-15 minutes, I try to give a broad spectrum analysis of what is sustainability, corporate sustainability, what has been and how it is going. But if I really want to focus on maybe 3 areas which are critical for us to understand how corporate sustainability is moving ahead, probably those will be these 3, as you could see over here. So the corporate climate change drives, the sustainable supply chain initiatives, and of course the reporting, stakeholder engagement and materiality comes as a integral part of reporting. And as you could see over here, they are not distinct. They are pretty much interconnected, and an organization has to focus on each of these pillars for taking forward its corporate sustainability agenda. So how has been the trends and the developments in the climate change part? How companies have been focusing on this? So obviously, as nowadays we see that companies are talking about decarbonization strategies or net zero strategies, but it was not the case. 10 years back, it was all about, okay, reducing pollution and all that. So the thought process has changed. We now have science-based targets. We have SBTI, famously talking about how we could take forward to a better planet for the next generation. There's a lot of focus on emission, more on the scope 3, because more or less companies, they were able to track scope 1 and scope 2, and for the wider audience over here, I mean, maybe it's getting a bit technical, but just to keep it simple, emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, as famously known as, are direct and indirect. So direct is something which I have control over. Indirect is something which I do not have control over. So scope 3 is, there are several categories of scope 3. I'm not getting into the details of it, but sometimes scope 3, a company has no control over, right? Suppose a very simple example, an employee can choose to come to bus in its own vehicle, right? Instead of getting into the company. Okay, so there's a very, layman example, but again, just to make you understand that companies are now trying to get into that kind of detail to figure out how they can reduce their footprint, carbon footprint or GHG footprint, for a greener planet. Okay, so as you see rightly over here, even they are getting into a discussion with the supply chain partners just to understand how they can reduce their footprint. Of course, they are also, an organization is also responsible for the supply chain or the vendor footprint, right? Because all those commodities, all those goods will be used for production of that company's product. So you could understand, there are real-time data monitoring systems which are being implemented just to understand how all this data can be monitored. So, all these initiatives or all these technological developments, we could not even thought about like 15 years back or even 10 years back. So that's the progress. That's the focus of the organizations. Renewable energy initiatives, a lot happening these days. There are government schemes, a lot of tax benefits and all those are coming into the picture, so that companies are getting encouraged to get into renewable and other stuff. And of course, as I said, you will find this point repeating again and again, is of the stakeholder demands. Everyone is quite focused now. It's way long back in my career, probably 10 years back. I remember for one of the leading organizations in India, in the AGMs, that organization, which again is a leading brand in India, was asked that your footprint is this, how, and it's, whatever the trend is, but how do you plan to make it better in the coming years? So it shows that the amount of concern or amount of knowledge your stakeholders or your uh, you know your followers of the organizations are, they want to know, how they want you to ensure, they want you to behave ethically and responsibly, right? So now I will quickly move on to the supply chain, sustainable supply chain initiatives. But just I will take a pause over here. So we could see that, of course, we talk about, we just finished talking about the climate change part, but of course, that climate change initiatives or drives are an integral part. They're an integral part of their own operations. Just summarizing what I've said, own operations, like reducing their scope 1, scope 2, and focusing a lot on scope 3 so that they can cut it down, and focusing beyond their organization boundary, which is focusing on the supply chain emissions and how they could reduce. Okay, so sustainability, the biggest shift in mindset which has happened. So when I started and how I have seen, sustainability is pretty much used to be within an organizational focus, as I said, and sometimes it was misinterpreted as a corporate social responsibility. But people understood the values of it. I'm repeating because I could see some of the audience are joining in late. So I'm repeating for them. So obviously, sustainability is not now within just the boundary of the organization, but it's beyond that. It's the shift from the shareholder to the stakeholder perspective. With that, I move on to the this section where I will be highlighting the key trends and developments in the supply chain part. So supply chain, again, was of not that of focus areas when sustainability was thought to be within the organizational boundary, right? It has now changed. So again, of course, all those climate change part are there, but companies are focusing a lot on sustainable sourcing, okay, about the ethical practices. So there are a lot of standards and certifications available in the market. Again, I am not required to name those. If you search in Google, there are a lot many. But primarily, what they are looking into. So they are broadly, again, there can be many specific as well, but broadly into social and environmental. Okay. Social, as I gave an example, just to make sure that, okay, you have a maybe 3-tier supply chain. Okay. How is it responsible? Are you engaging, child labor or forced labor? Maybe you are a famous fashion brand sitting in one of the European countries, but your supply chain extends to the one of the developing countries. How are you ensuring that it is, ethical practices are being deployed in your supply chain? So are you thinking about it? So these are the questions that the organizations are getting asked, and that is why they are implementing practices. That is why they are getting on with all these certifications and all this verifications. And again, it's not a one time exercise. It's not that okay, I do it and I'm done for the rest of my life, because all of this again have a reporting period or have a certain period of validity. So it's a continuous process where organizations they have to go through all this checks and balances and produce evidence. and it's kind of an annual journey or a journey that they need to repeat over a period of time and moving on to the next level. And again, we have the regulations nowadays which is putting stricter focus into this. So sorry, you will jump. So yeah. So again, technology plays a big role nowadays. So just giving an example. So working, suppose with a metals and mining sector company, okay, and suppose it's a global brand, and they are mining all over the world, okay. Now we did talk about certification, we did talk about assessments, but if an organization of a large scale, suppose they have probably 200 sites globally, is it possible to do that manually over a period of time? Absolutely not. Okay. So what organizations are trying to do, they are trying to bring in different technologies like blockchain or IoT or whatever, and implement those so that this can be automated to a certain extent as much as it can be. Of course, we all learn from processes, we all learn from the technological developments and try to develop and implement and integrate it. But how this can be integrated so that while we are not moving away from manual verifications or physical verifications or site visits and all that, there are a lot of auditing firms and the big fours and others, they do all this kind of audits. There is definitely a value addition to it where you go to the site, you visit the site, you meet the people, you understand the processes. But again, for a company example as large scale as having 100 sites or 200 sites, it's not possible to do that physically. Okay. So how this technology can be implemented so that all those checks and balances could be done to a certain extent. So that's where technology is playing a big role. And as I was talking about CSRD, it's going big. Some of you might be thinking, okay, fine, it's for the European countries, right? No. So if we go through the regulations, we will see that even if you are an Indian-based organization, but you having a business over here, yeah, there are certain checks and balances. But if you are having operations and if you are coming within that criteria, then again you have to report. Okay. So as I was mentioning that I was reading one of the articles, and this could impact probably 50,000 companies. So that shows the scale of it, the scale of organizations across sectors and sizes, how they will be influenced by this regulation. Okay. We have the CS Triple D, which is focusing on the supply chain. Again, it is yet to come, but it's pretty much banging on the door. So if we as an organization are simply slipping over it, then we will be at risk when it really comes in. So it has its own process of approvals, and it's almost there. So this is just to give an idea that, okay, fine, it doesn't mean that I'm operating in Australia or I'm operating in India or in any other part of the world. I'm absolutely, I can be free from all this. No. Okay. So when there is regulation in certain part of a world, it gradually cascades down to other geographies. Even other geographies, other industry sectors also become proactive and implement. Okay. Because people are seeing the value out of it. Okay, so moving on to the last section of our focus area. Okay, stakeholder engagement and maturity and sustainability reporting. So I will just go a step back, saying that we are all aware of annual report, right? Where the financial performances are disclosed. So sustainability report is a report where organizations they report on their sustainability performances, which can be social, which can be environmental, etc. And other stuff. They highlight their case studies, and there are standards to it. Of course, in subsequent slides I will highlight on that. But why is this section important, and how is this, a reporting section or a reporting drive so relevant to supply chain and climate change? If that's the question coming to your mind, then I would like to say that reporting again is comes at the fag end of a sustainability strategy by an organization or initiative, but it is the forum or it is the media through which the organizations, when they put up the sustainability report in the public domain, they can disclose what have been their performances, how they are improving, how they're in decreasing their GHG footprint, or how they're integrating circular model to their business. What are the case studies? You know how they are improving on their consumer grievances or whatever. So uh, you up in the public domain and anyone can access it. Okay. However, it is also important nowadays that it's kind of a mandated thing now. Like I work in corporate organization now, and previously I've worked in consulting. We have seen in many analyst surveys or many tenders or RFPs where clients are very much interested to understand our sustainability performances. Now you might be thinking, why? Fine. Now, if we get into that client's shoes and just try to think, because that client is also interested to understand as what is their vendor doing. Okay. So as I said, sustainability is beyond the boundary. So it's all integrated and interconnected, as you might remember I showed in one of the slides, right? Okay. So what are the reporting frameworks? Yeah. So there has been a lot of evolution in this reporting landscape. So when I had started long back, it used to be certain parameters. So primarily there used to be the GRI, which is famously the Global Reporting Initiative reporting framework, and there used to be like the GRI 3 version. I have not worked on GRI 1 or 2, but GRI 3 version, where a company has to report on like minimum 10 parameters. They get a C level report or a B level report for 20 plus, and 30 plus used to be a A level report. So it used to be that kind of a competition, like let's get into 11, so we get from C to B, or 21, so from B to A. So things drastically changed when around 2013-14 came GRIG 4, which was which introduced the concept of materiality. Now, what is materiality? So materiality is, or material issues are the issues which are sustainable or ESG issues which are important for our organization to report on. Great, but who decides that? No, it's unfortunately it's not the organization who decides. So here comes the role of the stakeholders. So the stakeholders get an opportunity to decide or to give their opinion. Okay, this we feel are the important sustainability issues for the organization. So how does it happen? So an organization has to reach out to their stakeholders. Okay, they can have different criteria for selection of their stakeholders. Now, all the stakeholders will not have the same kind of weightage. That's fine, but it's all about an inclusive approach, as we say, inclusivity in sustainable development. Okay, so what they think or what the stakeholders think are important for you. So that was the major shift. So of course now there are like sector specific reporting standards. Came the GRI standard, of course, which is now most relevant. Uh, of course, then came CDP reporting, integrated reporting, and lot many. Okay, so all these have evolved in the last 10 to 14 years. So you could understand that it has not happened overnight. Okay. Now, if there is a question coming to your mind that why these reporting standards are coming up, or how this reporting bodies are deciding, again, they're also reaching out to the stakeholders. Okay. So if I take GRI as an example, it's not that they sit in maybe their Amsterdam office and on a beautiful summer afternoon they decide these are the reporting parameters. No, it's not like that. Okay, it goes throughout for a period of time where they bring in the industry experts, they bring in different thought leaders. Okay, what are the current issues, how this can be evolved? Okay, they put up a draft, suppose if they are changing, example, the waste indicator. Okay, simple example. They put up the draft version of the change version in the website, and they request feedback, they request opinion. So that is how it happens. So it's all about an inclusive approach, which is taken by these bodies also for developing the standard, which are followed by organizations globally. The trend in reporting, of course, it has gone exponentially high. It's not about just a reporting exercise. As I said, sometimes organizations are required to submit sustainability report to different funding agencies or be eligible for, for a grant or a fund. Okay. These reports are sometimes picked up by different rating agencies. Okay. These reports are being followed by different consumers, competitors, as how they're doing. So it's one is of course a branding perspective, but more than that, companies are also trying to showcase how they're contributing. And throughout this exercise, when they're doing this exercise over a period of time, they are also seeing the value out of it, as they could analyze the data which are coming up. They could, several data I have seen which have come up, which they have not visualized or have not studied previously. So that's the help of, or that's the benefit of the reporting. We spoke about materiality assessments. Uh, Again, independent assurance and verification is a big part. All of you from India, you must have seen, but it's not only limited to India. It's globally, organizations are encouraged to go for assurance. Okay, there are again different assurance standards. I'm not getting into that. But why it is that? Because it adds a lot of credibility to the information that is getting published. So a company A who publishes a report without an assurance, and a company B who publishes with an assurance, of course, the information is validated. Okay, so there are different bodies and agencies who does that. And as I said, there are a lot of focus. So in this reporting standards, they have, climate related disclosures. So the companies are also reporting to it. So, yeah. Sorry. There's one more slide. So this information, as you could see, are again, as you could see, the different digital formats where the companies are getting encouraged. CSRD does mention it, so that information is available readily. Okay, and it's machine readable, so that a lot of information can be extracted and analyzed by different bodies. And if there are issues with the information that the company is publishing, anyone can go back and question. Okay, so that is how it is. It's not about transparency, it is not about ethical, it's about being accountable of your sustainability initiatives, of the information you are disclosing. And we have mentioned about the regulatory and the investor pressure. So this brings the last slide of my deck, and I could understand it is almost 1040 plus. Sorry, 240 plus. Sorry, 340 plus. I'm wrong. But what I would like to summarize over here is we could clearly see that the reporting initiative is pretty much integrated with their corporate sustainability strategy, which includes the climate change strategy, which includes the supply chain strategy. And when these exercises are happening, they are not happening isolated. They're happening all in parallel. So the teams who are working on maybe focusing on integrating sustainable practices in supply chain simultaneously work with the climate change team, simultaneously work with the reporting team. So it's an year-long exercise which goes on. Okay, because everyone has certain goals, targets, and ambitions to achieve. It's not about just doing an exercise for the sake of doing it, but of course, taking that organization to the next level, making it socially responsible, environmentally responsible, aligning with the regulations. So there are a lot of factors which comes into all this corporate sustainability initiative drives. And I think I could highlight how these corporate sustainability initiatives are adding to a better world. But I'm sure there will be a lot of questions which I'm happy to take and answer. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Souvik. That was a brilliant presentation on corporate sustainability, and it was wonderful to hear from you and understand, your expertise around the topic. I particularly found it very interesting to understand corporate sustainability, the different concepts around it, sustainable supply chain, and the role of stakeholder engagement, especially when it comes to reporting and reporting framework. So thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
the presentation. We do have quite a lot of questions in the chat box. So if you are ready, I would like to start the Q&A session.
Sure.
Yeah, I will raise some questions that we have received in advance via the registration form, and also look at the questions that we have received in the chat box. Uh, for those of you who would like to share any thoughts or your experiences of corporate sustainability, please do share your questions, thoughts, experiences in the chat box. Um, so my first question is, how can corporate sustainability impact national development plans of for governments around the Commonwealth?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So as I mentioned, that suppose if I'm taking the example of India, okay. So we have this section 135 of the Companies Act, which are mentioning that 2% of the last 3 years average profit has to be invested. Okay, so the companies are actually it's first of all we have to understand this is just a motivating factor, a driving factor for the government to help the organizations to invest. Okay, so and then it is up to the organization to build up all those community development strategies. Okay, now before I get onto the community development strategies, if I try to reflect back, okay, so we have the different SDG goals.
Mhm.
So we have, SDG 1, which talks about eliminating poverty, or we have SDG 3 about the health. So we have the different prime minister schemes and all that in India, right? Similarly, over, in other parts of the world, we'll also have the same. Okay. So what happens is now when an organization is operating, they're also, suppose a manufacturing organization will have their sites in different parts of any country, right? Suppose it is operating in an area where there is a lot of water scarcity. But example, if my product involves a lot of water processing and all that, so I'm depriving the community over there. Now, if I stop operations, then that is also another problem because there will be job losses, right? So it is that fine balance. So it's all interconnected. But as I said, coming back to the question, so all these initiatives, like the job creation or a social benefit or environmental, all these corporate initiatives, they actually add on to the social goals. Okay, if I'm talking about UK, by 2040 or 50, for net zero, or India for 2017, or all the nations, they have their net zero goals or decarbonization goals. So is it possible for them to achieve it without the organizations doing their bit? No. So that is how the organizations are contributing to the overall national, regional, or international development. So I hope that explains the interconnected.
Great, thank you so much. Since you have mentioned or given example of India, there's a question in the chat box around if it is possible for you to give an example of a company or organization that has successfully embraced and practiced corporate sustainability either in India or elsewhere.
Yeah, sure. So I can give many examples. So I have been lucky to work in UAE. I've been lucky to work in India. I'm based out of UK. I have even traveled to USA, North America, even to remote parts, and in Indonesia. So I've seen a lot. Okay. So yes, I mean, if the example is for India, I will give one Indian example and one global
Yeah.
example. So in India, I have worked with a major conglomerate who works in the metals and mining sector, and I was lucky enough to visit one of their sites in the eastern part of India, and the nearest airport is probably 4 to 5 hours that far. It's a remote, one of the remotest part. So when I went over there, yeah, they have a plant and all that, but the moment I went to a school which they have set up to promote literacy in that region was alarming, or it was so motivating for me to see, because there are even first generation who are going to school. Okay, so this is a very fine example of how it's not about just creating jobs. Okay, so when we have in India, we have the major hotels and all that. So I was lucky enough to work with one of them, to again went to one of the remotest part of India to understand how they have set up mock training facilities so that youths from there can train themselves and go out to bigger cities and bigger chains and get jobs over there. Okay, I have done on-field interactions with this kind of families. I'm leaving aside the computer literacy and other initiatives, which all these organizations they do as part of their corporate social responsibility. Having said that, if I look on the infrastructure development, an organization not only create jobs, they create the infrastructure around it also, right? So whenever then an organization comes in, the overall socio-economic status improves. They also implement environmental initiatives also to cut down on that. So that is how I have seen in if I go outside, I've seen in UAE, I've seen in UK, or different parts of the world, how companies are implementing all these strategies to promote or take up initiatives where they can create more, or contribute to social and economic values. So yeah, definitely, corporate responsibility or corporate sustainability plays a big role in all this, global development.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for providing that example and clarifying the question. Um, One of the first questions that came in was on carbon credit. Could you provide further details or explain what carbon credit is for our attendees?
Yeah, sure. It's a mechanism. Again, it's a very specific question. Again, it can be getting a bit technical. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that companies are now looking for decarbonization strategies. They are planning to reduce their footprint. So all these mechanisms are there. You can buy carbon credits. So it's you can reduce or you can cut down your emissions or mitigate your emissions to a certain extent. But of course, carbon credit, you need to buy some of the credits to be fully neutral if you're planning for that. Again, these are very case specifics. These are industry specifics, and it's very it'll not be fair if I pass on like a 1 2 line statements on what it is and how it should be done. But again, yeah, it is one of those mechanisms which helps the organizations to be contributing to the greener future. Yeah.
Thank you, Souvik. So next question is, you did mention about tools. To know, do you have any tools or approaches to carry out stakeholder engagement analysis or partnership analysis?
Yeah, sorry, I lost you in between. So are you asking about tools and
Yes,
mechanisms for
tools,
what?
tools or approaches to carry out stakeholder engagement analysis or partnership analysis.
Yeah, definitely. So when this stakeholder or maturity concept came up in 2013 and 14, now of course, almost all the major consulting firms or even the boutique consulting firms have their own tools, to carry out or reach out to the stakeholders. But how this process normally happens is, you select or identify a group of stakeholders. You means the organization selects, of course, when the consulting partner is working on behalf of the organization, and you identify whichever those material or issues, a bucket list of issues you want to reach out to, get their feedback. Okay, prioritize, as I said, some of them are weighted as well. So stakeholder A will have more understanding about the company's operations than a stakeholder B, which is quite obvious. Okay, so it's how you apply those weightages and all that. And there are different tools. So if you are interested, you can search in Google. You will see probably many of all of the big fours, they have it. Okay, I have worked with firms where they had their own tools as well, and it comes handy. But again, it's not something like a one-stop tool or something. That also evolves with period of time and regulations, and as we hear from the organizations or as our experience goes.
And uh, d- there's a question on how to access the reporting frameworks. So could you shed light on how, if someone is interested in accessing reporting frameworks such as GRI and IR that you mentioned, is that accessible for everyone?
Yeah, so GRI, if you go to their website, it's all uploaded, so anyone can go and download it. So yeah, it's all publicly available.
Okay, great.
Even I also, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Um, Then there's a question on corporate sustainability, especially on environmental aspects, seems not very clear or prioritized by most nonprofits. How might the nonprofits organizations be supported, for example, to measure and report their carbon footprints, to influence behavior of their staff, of the people working at the nonprofits, and other stakeholders?
Yeah, so see, first of all, a very good question, I would say. The short answer will be, there needs regulations around it. There needs policies and all that, and that happens over a period of time. Just to give an example, like today, in India, probably we talk about first 1,000 listed companies reporting, right? I remember when it all started, it was 100 listed. Okay, today we have CSRD talking about 50,000 companies. So you could understand that it's actually cascading down. Where a lot of companies across different sizes and sectors are now getting into this and being required to report. The question you can ask is, okay, then fine, why it was not done 1,000 years back? Sorry, 10 years back, why didn't you include all 1,000 companies at the very first go? So it doesn't happen like that, because the maturity has also needs to improve, right? So that is how it happens over a period of time. So definitely for all this non-profits, some of them are quite leading. You will see they come up with their policies or disclosures. For the smaller ones, definitely yes, but that also is something which I'm sure they will be required to report on in coming days. Sorry, I see a hand raised.
Nicola, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt if there are other questions still on the list, and I know we're running out of time. Is it all right for me to
It's
ask it?
fine. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I was just interested in, there seems to be a challenge. There are two things. The one question is, there's been this sort of push over the years for what you call SHE or sustainability reporting for corporations. And in the last year and a half, 2 years, there's been this big shift now towards ESG reporting. So how would you see them? Are they different? Are they the same? It's kind of the ESG side now is this big buzzword for corporations. And I'm from South Africa. There are a lot of companies here who are advertising for, heads of ESG and heads, whereas they've always had a sustainability a division. And then the other thing that is I find a challenge when we're looking at corporate sustainability is when you look at it from an asset manager's perspective and you look at ESG reporting and the implications it has, for example, on share prices and things like that, they're still not taking it very seriously. And they still regard it very much as that it's corporate sort of license to operate or window dressing as a license to operate rather than a truly serious matter that, impacts the long-term sustainability of our planet, which if you're in sustainability, you understand. But somehow it isn't translating into the actual crux of the business decision-making, above the profit line kind of thing. So those are my two questions. What is this new thing around ESG and how do we get your asset managers or corporations to look at it more seriously as opposed to a license to operate? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Wonderful question. And I'm not sure if I will have all the time to answer it. But yeah, I mean, rightly said. So if I'm correct on the head of ESGs and all that, ESG is definitely a buzzword. But if I get into too much technicality of it, ESG normally refers to a framework, right? Whereas again, it is true that some companies are not taking it seriously, or they are, I would rather put it in this way, that they are not understanding the value of integrating it. All this happens because there is a lack of awareness. Okay, I would take this question in a different way. All these issues arise because there is a lack of awareness, there is a knowledge gap, or people or organizations do not understand the interconnectedness of all these factors. The risk that comes out of it, okay, of all these issues are huge. Okay, so if we get on to the WEF report and which comes up normally in the beginning of the year, we could see how many sustainability issues are getting flagged. Okay, having worked with clients in South Africa also, I have a decent understanding of that region. Yes, but it's not only focused or just limited to that part of the world. Obviously, it's broad spectrum. But having said that, there are also companies who are taking it forward, taking it to the next level because they have seen it or done it over years. Okay. Now, again, you mentioned about the asset managers. You mentioned about if I generalize it for like stakeholders, again, I would rather say it's the lack of awareness or the understanding of the importance of the benefits of sustainability and the risk associated, which I think is a major issue. Having said that, I have also worked in a lot of sustainable finance projects where there are huge scale developments happening in different infrastructure projects in Middle East or in Asia, where all these EU taxonomies or all these green bonds, sustainable bonds or loans principles are followed. Okay, so there are two sides of it. It's not that it's not getting followed at all. Definitely it is. And I think when these regulations come, sustainability is definitely beyond the regulations. That's what we have all learned from the very beginning of our career. It's not something we do because of regulations, but regulations are definitely needed. It's a push that is needed to make everyone start getting into the process before they understand the benefit associated with it. So I think that is where these regulations will play a bigger role. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And before I close, I just want to say good luck for the T20 final. We'll be playing each other in the cricket.
Thank you. Good luck to you as well. Yeah, to South Africa. I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for the brilliant question. I think with this, we will end the Q&A session now. But thank you so much for all the questions that came in. Unfortunately, we will have to end the Q&A with this last question. And thank you so much, Souvik, for responding to all the questions that have come in and for your presentation. We will shortly start the post-webinar networking session. But before that, Souvik, would you like to say a final few words for anyone who would not like to continue with the post-webinar networking session, and if you would like to leave the webinar as well? Is there anything you would like to summarize in terms of the webinar topic?
So first of all, thanks to CSC, thanks to you, Eva, and thanks to all the the organization for giving me this opportunity to speak. Hopefully, it's a Friday afternoon. I have not bored anyone with my 1 hour session. I believe I was able to provide some insights and knowledge into what's happening in this corporate sustainability world, which is quite big. A lot of interesting questions, and thanks to all who have joined this session. Definitely, I enjoyed the Q&As, and I'm sure with all these initiatives which are taken by CSC, it's definitely a good networking opportunity also, but it's also a forum where we could know a lot of information and knowledge, because that is pretty much needed in today's world. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be there in the networking session today because I have a meeting scheduled which was long back. But otherwise, thanks again, and thanks to everyone for attending this.